Hello and welcome back to the Spare Room Studio. This is Jackie here. Today I've got a video for you showing my alcohol marker collection and permanent marker collection and how I might use those in colouring books. To start with, I've got Prismacolor Premier alcohol markers here, and I don't know if these are even available anymore. I haven't done any research on them. I've had these for quite a few years, probably maybe 15 years or more, and they were quite expensive to buy. I bought them open stock in an art store here because prior to Amazon becoming big, it was difficult to source art materials in art stores here. There wasn't a lot on offer, and what we could get was quite expensive. And if we wanted to buy things from overseas, the postage made the cost so prohibitive, it was hard to do things. So these were one of the brands that was available to me, and I'd buy them a couple at a time as I had funds to buy them. And they're great markers. They've never yellowed, and they are really good quality. They go a long way, they last a long time, and the nibs are really good quality. They have a fine nib at one end and a chisel tip at the other, and the quality of the nibs is really good. I use an empty one of these that I put low toxic solvent into, and I use it as a colourless blender for my coloured pencils, and it works great. I've had it for years and it's never worn out. I also have a couple of different pens in here with this, and these are just odd things that I've picked up over the years. I did go to the US one time and managed to pick up some art supplies when I was there, and I think that's where I brought these back from. They are Zig writers, and I also have a couple of Copic Chows and distress markers in here, Tim Holtz distress markers. Another brand that I have is the Graphic Pro Duo, and I don't know if they are still available, but I bought those in an art store here. It says the Art Studio on them, and they are a chisel tip and a fine tip. And they were great little markers as well. They worked really well for me. So I keep them in tubs and just grab out what I need when I'm working on them. This is my huge permanent marker collection, and this is Sharpies. A selection of Sharpies, a cheap home brand for one of our discount department stores here called Kmart, and they have the Anko brand. I have some Shuttle Art permanent markers, and I think that these were one of the ones that were yellowing for me. I also have some Bic in here, and I have a few left of an old set and these are all drying up now. I've used them a lot, and these are called Bic Markit, Markit, and these are permanent markers as well. They call that a fine point, but it's really not that fine, and it's a bullet tip, and they're very similar to this one, but the colour range was really different. So I don't know if they're still making them or not, but they were really good. And I also have the Bic Intensity in an Ultrafine point in here. And I have the Sharpies in the fine point and the Ultrafine point. So that's how I keep those. I also have a couple of sets of skin tone sets that I've bought recently, and I have not used these enough yet to comment on whether I like them or don't like them. This one is Oleap, and it's a set of 24 colours, and it was on a really good deal on Amazon, which is why I've got them. And I haven't really needed them yet, so I'm putting them aside until I really feel like I need some extra colours. And the same with these ones. These ones are Touch, and I believe I've had something very similar to this in a full colour set, and they were ones that yellowed a little bit as well, because a lot of these cheaper brands, like that says Touch on the case, but on the marker itself it says simple Oa. I'm not quite sure how to say that. Simpleoa. Now these might very well yellow as well. I haven't used them yet to discover whether that is the case or not. But what I plan to do when I use them is I'll use a document protector, and I've got one here to show you. This is how they come if you're not familiar with them. You put them into a ring binder with your documents, and what I do with it, I'm just going to grab some scissors. And sorry, these are really ratty pair of scissors, they're not great ones. But what I do, and I can't take credit for this because I have seen somebody else do it on YouTube many years ago, and I can't remember their name, I'm afraid. But she just showed it on YouTube years ago and it stuck with me. And you just cut off the white strip on the side. And if the sleeve is still joined, you just have to separate that. And that one's great, that's all open. And you just get your book. Now over here we call it A4 is the general size of paper that we use. So these sleeves are A4 size, and then you just slip it over your page like that. It's not the perfect fit for most colouring books that are these square ones because you're going to have a gap there. So if there was marker on this exposed bit, I might actually put some paper behind it as well. And they're far too long. So if I'm using one in a book like this, I would cut it off there with the scissors. And that's just... the reason I use that over having stacks of paper in the book is that when the book is closed, it is much slimmer and it's not forcing that binding open like it does when you have loads of paper shoved in between your pages. So if it covers the area that's going to yellow adequately, then that's a very simple idea that works quite well. So that's what I do with those, and that's what I plan to do with those markers. If I haven't sufficiently tested them and not sure if they're going to yellow or not, I'm going to put a sleeve over the page. And then the last set of alcohol markers that I have here is my Ohuhu. These are 200 colours. I'm not sure what the name of this series is, but it's a broad tip or chisel tip at one end and a fine tip at the other. So I've got the 200 colour set of the Ohuhu. Now my hands are a bit beat up, so I apologise for that. I've been gardening and doing stuff, so I've banged my hands up a little bit, so I apologise for that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually show you how I would use all of these markers in a colouring page. So what I have here is a selection of the different markers, and I've tried to choose similar colours from what I have because I don't have full sets here, and I'm going to show you how I would use those in a page. So I'm going to start with the permanent markers first because I know that some people don't enjoy working with those as easily as alcohol markers because they do have a slightly different makeup and the way the ink works. So I'll start with blending. You try to choose some colours that are very similar. And you can start with the dark first and then work over that with the lighter colour. And the only thing I don't like about Sharpies is, like everybody else, is the colour, the smell, sorry, the scent. They are really quite strong, so it is wise to work in you know, a ventilated area and have decent breaks away from them, because they do smell, and they can even smell, you know, in the book long after you've used them. You can still smell them. I could smell that tub as soon as I opened it, that it was the permanent markers and not the alcohol markers. So that's how I would work even with the Sharpies. Of course, I could always do dotting and work that way to blend colours, and then you're not going to get such a strong, intense dark colour, because you're blending by that visual method of dots. Or you can just go back over it like that. So it's darkened that area just like that way as well. So that's Sharpies, and of course with the Sharpies you also have an ultrafine point that you can go in and do some details after. I'll see if I can grab one of those really easily, because I've got stacks of things all over the place here. If I could find one really quickly. And of course I can't find an ultrafine one when I want one. Have I got one there after all? No. Okay, no, I can't find one. So, you know, you can put some details in with the ultrafine point as well. So that's Sharpie. This one was the cheap brand, and that will work with the Sharpies as well. This isn't, I think this is starting to dry out a bit. It's not real wet, but it's still suitable for this blending method, especially when one of them is juicy. The one that is not quite so wet will still work with it. Okay, so those two brands have worked together okay. And then we'll have a look at the Shuttle Art permanent markers and how they work. So again, I would use maybe a little bit of the darker colour first and then come in with that one. And again, you know, try to work in a small area and work wet in wet. Don't let the marker dry too much before you try to blend the two colours together, because once it starts drying you get really obvious lines. Okay, so that's how the Shuttle Art, they work in the same manner as well. These one are the Big Intensity, and they're ultra fine points. I don't think I had any in that sort of colour range to show you a blending. I've got a dark one here, that's a purple. And no, so I'll see if I can have a go. That's with the fine point, the Bic Market, and this is the Bic Intensity Ultra Fine. So yeah, you can do that. And then these are perfect for doing some light dotting. And then what I can do with that is grab a lighter colour. This is from the Shuttle Art, you know, different brands, so they tend to all work together. And then go back in with that. And Kerby has drawn some little texture lines there for the peacock's head, so and that's starting to blend nicely there. And you can come back as many times as you want. I think with these, I'd probably work faster even than with the alcohol markers. But you can see I'm still getting a decent blend there with those. So that's the Bic Market and the Bic Intensity Ultrafine. And I did find a Sharpie Ultrafine point in the end. It's not the right colour, but they work very much like the Bic Intensity Ultrafine. In fact, they're probably even a smaller nib. So I've used that on the head there. I'll lift this up to the camera in a short while and show you all the different markers. So this is the Prismacolor Premier alcohol markers. And I do need to go through my tub and do a test on all of these markers because some of them are, you know, drying out now. They're old and I've used them a lot. And I've never really done like a proper stock take to see just how many of them are still working properly. And I think part of me was hoping that I'd find some way to refill them, and I haven't yet. And that's why I haven't thrown all of these pens away, because I feel it's a bit wasteful to be throwing all the pen cases away all the time. So I am going to look into refilling them, whether I can even use another company's product to refill them, even if they're not the same colour maybe. So that's how the Prismacolor Premier work, and they are alcohol markers. So all of this bit was permanent marker and alcohol marker. The Graphic Pro Duo, I don't have this sort of colour range. This one's a greeny, yellowy green. But I'll just show you that will work with it as well. Let's get that lighter Sharpie out again. Okay, so that works alongside the permanent markers okay as well. And I have a Copic here. The Copic nibs, especially these brush nibs, are really lovely to work with. I think this might be, yeah, that end is drying out. Sadly, I don't think I'll be using those for much longer. And then this one is the Zig Writer. This one says it's pigment ink, waterproof. So I'm guessing it's probably water-based. No, maybe not water-based if it's waterproof. I'm a bit confused about how those work. And that is how the fine tip works. And that has a bullet tip at the other end that's quite broad. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to see if that Sharpie, no, see straight away it wants to tear the paper up, so I'm thinking that pigment ink has actually got some sort of water base in it. As long as I don't disturb the paper, I can work around it and still blend that colour in though. Okay, so that's how they work. And of course I have already showed you how I work with the Ohuhu. But we'll just have another quick... I've just randomly grabbed these. They're not going to match all that great, but that one is a mint green light and this is a pale green. Doesn't look too bad together actually. Okay, so that's just a really quick demo of how each of the markers work. The next one I'm going to do is my water-based marker collection, and I will do a little bit more on this page as well. Just move those away. And we're just going to have a closer look here. So you can see, especially under the, sorry, the peacock's head at the top of its neck here, that was the Sharpies and permanent markers. And then the alcohol markers were over this side more. And the head there, you can see that all the different types of permanent markers from the Sharpie range and the Bic range, from the fine points to the ultra fine points, have all worked like that. So that's just a very quick start with the markers. I would keep layering that a bit more and a bit more until I get the intensity and depth that I want. So that's just a very, very quick look. I'm sorry, I've got all my little scratch paper and everything here as well. So if you have any questions about any of these, please drop it in the comment box, and I will just have a very quick break and I will come back with my water-based markers. So now I've got the water-based markers out, and I've got a huge mess around me, so I'm sorry if you hear any background noises. I keep a lot of my things that I'm using in these plastic tubs and grab out what I need as I go. And I've also got some stuff in their original packaging to show you how they come so that you can look out for them yourself. To start with, this is my fine liner and bent pen collection. I have a number of different sorts of things in here, from some gel pens, ordinary pens, and Stabilo .88s, Papermate flares. I've got no-name cheap stuff from cheap stores, and highlighter pens. So I've got all sorts of different types of pens in there, and these are just sort of biro, almost gel-like pens. And I keep my gel pens separately. I don't have a huge gel pen selection because I don't use them an awful lot. I used to do calligraphy many years ago, so I've got some pens left over from when I used to do calligraphy. I've got one graphic line painter here that was given to me or came with something. So I've got all sorts of different types of fine liners. And the Stabilo used to be in this wrap. It came as a set, but now I don't have very many left. I've taken them out and put them in here because I used them all up. And in here I have put some Staedtler Tri-Plus fine liners, and these ones are Artline Supreme fine pens. And what I find is that is a really handy roll to put into luggage if I go away, and keep it in there. So It used to be Stabilo, the Stabilo .88s, it's now Staedtler. So that's my fine liner collection. You've seen my Faber-Castell connector pens before. I also have the Crayola Colours of the World larger nibs in here in this tub. And I have the cheaper Anko brand and some no-name markers in there as well. I also have the ones that they call, they might be known as watercolour brush markers, and they have a brush nib down one end and a fine liner down the other end. And this brand is called Primrosia. It cost me a bit more money, but they are exactly the same as the cheaper ones that you get in huge big sets, and they are exactly the same nib on the brush end and the fine end. Might be a slightly different colour selection, but they essentially are the same pens. I've also got in here some Crayola Colours of Kindness, which was a small pack that came, and I've just stuck them in here with these. I've tried to sort of keep the colours in elastic bands just to sort of make it easier to find the colours. And I've also got some of the no-name brush markers as well in here. I've got some in here and some with the connector pens because it depended on where I needed the colours most. So when I say I'm using a water-based marker, I could be using any of these products. Because sometimes I use all of them in one picture, and other times I might only use one brand in one picture. So that's all my loose things. And now I'll show you some of the things that are in sets and how they come, so you might be able to look out for them better if you're not familiar with them. Faber-Castell connector pens, they do a 20 connector pen set that comes in pastel and neon colours. And you can see that I've jumped into here. This is my backup set, so that when I dry one of the other ones out, I just come to here and grab a new one. I don't know all the prices because I've bought these from many places. It isn't all from Amazon. So have a look around. Sometimes these will be cheap when it's back to school time and they're selling off all the back to school stationery cheap. You might find those on sale. The Faber-Castell connector pens that I work with generally is this 80 set. So there's 80 in there and 20 in there. Now I think that, and I'm only guessing this, but I think some of these are colours that aren't in this set, but I don't know for sure. Having a look now, some of them look suspiciously similar. So you might want to look into that before you go buying both sets. But I do use these lighter range quite a lot, so I was happy to pick this up. I think it was only a few dollars because I just keep dipping into it when I need it for a lighter colour. I tend to run them out pretty quick. So that's the Faber-Castell connector pens. I have some small sets that I've picked up really cheap from, there's a store here in Australia called Officeworks. It does all your business office products, stationery items and some art and craft materials. And they were a few dollars. I picked them up because again, they're light colours. They're really handy to use for blending with other colours. And I tend to go through the lighter ones very quick. These ones are the Staedtler Tri-Plus colours. There's only 26 in this set. These were from an art store and I got them on sale, but they were $44.95 originally. That's a lot of money when I can pick up 80 connector pens for, $20 say, and they want 45 for 26. Now I know that this is a much better brand, the ink's probably far better quality, but for a colouring book, the connector pens are more than sufficient for colouring in the colouring book. So these are nice to have, but they're the ones that I haven't quite got a grip with yet because the colours are very deep and vibrant, and sometimes they're a little bit too dark for what I want and I can't blend them out. So I'm still practicing with those. This is another cheap set. This is Milan, came from Officeworks as well. There's 50 colours in here. They have a tip that is very similar to the Crayola Super Tip. So I'm hoping that they're going to work in conjunction with the Crayola pretty well as well. This has a nice set of colours. They are not as deep or dark as what I expect sometimes, and that's not a bad thing because, as I say, I like to work lighter and then build up, so it's always handy to have lighter colours. And they weren't very expensive either. I have a few finer nibs here. I have the Colours of the World washable markers that are in the very fine tip, and I don't use these a lot because I find that the way that I work and the way that I blend, I'm tearing up the paper an awful lot with these little hard fine nibs. So I'm thinking these might actually work better in conjunction with the Fineliners and give me a range of colours to work with the Fineliners. So they won't go to waste either. But that's how they come in a set of 24. And another fine set, same, they're tearing up the paper. These were cheaper and I bought them from a craft store. They don't have any name on them. On the packet it says Clubhouse. And this is 10 skin tone colours, but that's got a really fine, hard nib as well. So I'm thinking that these won't be used so much with the water-based markers, but with the Fineliners. So that's those ones. Now, I've had Crayola Super Tips in the past, but used them up, and I didn't have any left. I think the few that I have left I gave to my granddaughter to play with. So I just recently bought the 100 colour set, and just today, before I filmed this, these arrived, and I ordered them on Amazon, but they came from Amazon UK. So it took a little bit longer to get these, and I believe they're fairly new. I haven't seen them in the shops here in Australia yet, and that's the pastel range, which I think is going to come in really handy, especially some of these colours here, and there's lighter blues. So I think a lot of us know how Crayola Super Tips work. And then the last ones I have to show you are the Staedtler 72 double-ended fibre tip pens. Now these are the water-based ones, not the permanent ones. And I do like these. They can be really, really wet and juicy the first time or first few times that you use them, and bleed through paper quite easily. But as they tend to dry out more, you find that doesn't happen. They have a very, very fine tip that is very hard. I think it's more like a nylon tip. And then they have a bigger nib at the other end that's very similar to the Crayola Super Tip shaped nib. So I have been using a smaller set than this, and I've started running out lots of colours in that. I don't have many left in it. And I was saving this 72 set for when I've run some of my other markers down. What I do is pick these things up when they're really cheap, especially anything that's of a more expensive nature. I wait until I see sales and I stock up on them when I can get them on sale. So that's the Staedtler 72 double-ended fibre tip pens. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get this page back again from Kerby's book. This is the Wondermorphia, and I chose this one because it's a single-sided pages, And I've just got to grab my backing sheets, as they fell on the floor. So you definitely need some paper behind them when you're using the permanent and alcohol markers. But I also play safe with the water-based markers, because if they're particularly dark or juicy, sometimes they will go through and even go through to the page behind as well. So I always try to play careful. Every now and again I forget, and then I end up having to fix pages that are behind. So I've got a ratty old scratch piece here that if I need to try any colours, but I'm going to show you how the various water-based markers work all on the one page as well. So I'm sorry for any background noise as I get myself sitting. Okay, so just to recap, you may have seen me use these before, but the Faber-Castell connector pens, I'm going to go in with that sort of mid-range, the darker one, back to the lighter one just to blend that edge out, and then I'm going to put a bit of green on there. So that's the connector pen. Next I will show you the Primrosia, but they're exactly the same as these unbranded. Sometimes they're white, sometimes they're black, but they're all pretty much the same type of barrel and nibs. And with that one, again, I might start with that lighter colour, then the darker colour, back to the lighter colour, or mid-range. If I've got three colours, I'd start with the mid-range, go back to the dark, back to the mid-range, and then finish up with the lighter one on the edge. And I have this blue one, it's a bit different. So I'd work the same way with those. And then just a little bit of the darker one, back to that one. And if I had lighter, I'd do a lighter one on the edge. These can also be used in other ways. My ratty old scratch pad. You know, you can do big areas like this. And you know, that's blending really easily. And if you keep moving, you're not going to get so many streaks, but it's also the same concept, sorry, getting my lids mixed up, as with the connector pens, that if you do that and you do have any lines, then you'd come back that way. And you do need to wait for these to dry as well, because if you saturate the paper enough, it's going to tear up. That's just the nature of working with a water-based product. And you can see that you can develop a depth of tone that way by just layering that same colour over and over and over. And then the other end is very fine, so you could do all your dotting with the fine tip. I found that some of the lighter colours with the fine tip don't work so great, so it's a bit hit and miss with that. But you know, if you don't want to go to the expense of having a set of fine liners and a set of markers, these are a great alternative, because you can do your detailed areas with these, or your little tiny areas with these. So they are a really economical buy. Now I'll show you some of the fine liners, And this might be a bit hard to see, I'll have to pick it up and show you. I think we might try and do some of this. So this is a very, very slow process. But what it is good for is if you've got headphones on and you're listening to music, or you've got the TV on, or you're listening to a podcast or YouTube video or something, you know, it gets very meditative and very relaxing. And then with a lighter colour you come and start blending in. And try to make your dots as random as possible. Don't go really carefully like this and get, you know, uniform lines, because that will be obvious. It's better to do some randomness. And that's how the colour, it's like an optical illusion. It blends gradually. And I would have to keep going at this, and then possibly if I could get a lighter blue, that would work even better. And in fact I've got a cheap version one here, which is a lighter blue. Even if you don't have music on or any other sounds on, just listening to that pen nib hitting the paper could be quite relaxing in itself. If you're someone that likes the ASMR type videos, it could be a very relaxing sound for you. Other people it might irritate the hell out of, but for some it might actually be really relaxing. Then we have here a brush marker. It looks like the Stabilo 0.88, but it's a brush marker. If I'm not blending that well enough, I can also just dab some of that into the areas that I want more solid and dark. And this is a no-name one that I bought out of a discount store, so you know, when you're in these discount stores and you see cheap pens, sometimes they end up being a good pickup, because you never know. Some of them are diamonds in the rough. The Staedtler Tri-Plus Fine Liner, I didn't grab out the same colours, but where could we use this perhaps? Maybe I'll just show you up here. So Kerby's put some lines there that suggest that this side is a bit darker. So you can dot, you can do fine hatching lines. And these Tri-Plus fine liners have got a very, very small nib. You can also do little scribble, you know, circles and marks and lines. Okay, so that's that one. I have Artline Fine 0.4 nib. That's probably similar to the Tri-Plus fine liner. And all of these are going to work together. This has got a different shape nib to it. It's very hard. And then also what I'll bring in with this is the highlighter sometimes as well. and especially if it's got a brush tip like this, it's really handy for just softly blending in any hard edges or just hiding any white areas that you don't want the white area so obvious. Okay, so I'll just pick that up for you and we'll have a quick look at that. So you see there how the dots work, and that needs a lot of work. Like that is just a very, very quick demonstration. But if you want to colour a whole picture and get impact with it, you need to layer those dots up a lot. Okay, now I'm just going to take a short break again and grab something else that I've thought about that I'll show you as well. So I'm back with my trusty water brush, and we're just going to do a little test to see, let's see if I get that going, how the fine liner might bleed. And if I show you just that small area there, you can see here it has picked up colour. So it's definitely diluting that. I'll just let that dry. And I'd like to show you how much these ones will move as well. So they move a lot. That's the watercolour brush marker. Now you can see that that lighter colour was only one layer. This was 3, so it's not moving as much. But also the two colours are actually working differently, I think. I believe the darker colour is moving more than what the lighter one is. And that's what I mean about how even in the same set of pens, the different colours will react. So you can see how much extra colour has come of that. Now that has sat there for a while. I haven't done that while it's wet. So we'll try over here with, while that is actually very wet, and we'll see what can happen with that. So there I dropped a drop of water into it. And we're going to see what happens with that. I'm just going to put that aside to dry. And while that's drying, I'll show you on the page what, how I might actually use that and how it will react on Kerby paper. So on the Kerby paper, it's diluting even better, and it's spreading a long way. We'll drop water in that and we'll see what happens. Now, of course, you could do this by scribbling onto a piece of plastic, onto a plate, or you know, some sort of hard, non-porous surface. You can scribble your pen on there, and then using water, you can pick it up, whether it's with a water brush or a traditional brush, and you can paint with it as a watercolour. But I kind of like the hard edges and so on that you get from these. Now I feel that these give more of a watercolour effect than what the connector pens do. But I like the connector pens because I like some of the colour range in it. So, you know, I'll take bits from one set and bring them with this set and use them together. They don't have to be used separately. Now that paper was damp there, and I've gone over the damp paper with the pen to see what will happen. And it's bleeding really nicely, even just on the damp paper like that. So I think we're getting much more impact with these pens than we did with the connector pen. And again, different papers will react differently as well. Okay, so we'll let that do its thing. And what I think I'll do is I might take a short break again, and I'll come back to you when that has dried. I'm not going to use a hairdryer on it because I think it will change the result a little bit. But this is plain photocopy paper, my ratty scrap paper here. And have a look at that bleeding and separation of the inks. Now, that would be beautiful for the peacock. I didn't think about that before I put, you know, the permanent marker on it. I should have thought about using that on the body of the peacock, and then the permanent markers could be done on that intricate work. So that's just an idea of how you could approach a page. And then that's the one that was a bit drier. It was 3 layers, and then I used the water brush on it, and that is just 1 layer that I used the water brush on there, and that isn't even dry yet. Okay, so I shall take that short break, and I'll come back to you and show you how that has dried. Okay, so these have dried now, so I'll show you how the watercolour brush marker, I do stumble over that name, the watercolour brush marker, that is how it has dried. And I think that would be a great effect for the peacock body itself, but it might also be great for doing an idea for gemstones or geode type stones. And that's the other areas. That was 3 layers of the pen, and then I went over with the water. This was less colour. I think it was only like the 1 layer, and I think that that may have just had a nicer bleeding effect than what that heavier area did. So that's how those little examples dried, and this is how the book dried. And that is more like a true watercolour effect, what I would describe as a wet in wet technique that gives you the hard edges. And especially where, I don't know if you remember, but that is where I put the drop of clean water into the area and let it dilute on its own. Did that a little bit here as well. And that's how the fine liner dried after I put some water on top of that with the highlighter pen. And you can see that the areas with the highlighter pen have bled better than what the fine liner on its own did. But it has diluted it a little bit. So you need to experiment with how much you want things to dilute or blend or whatever. You need to sort of have a go yourself and find the methods that work for you. Now I did forget to show you how these ones work. This is the Staedtler double-ended fibre tip pens, and I'll do that over here. I think that's with quite a dark colour. Then I'm going to go to a mid colour, and already that's starting to tear the paper up, and I think that's just because these are more wet. They're actually a new pen. I mean, I've never used these ones yet. These are straight out of the packet, and this is how they are. So if you're working with something like that, then perhaps be a little bit more gentle with how you're doing those strokes as you're blending them, and it won't tear the paper up quite so bad. And also what I want to show you is how the back looks. So you can see let's get this bent over. You can see obviously the alcohol marker and the permanent pens have gone right through. And this bit here is where I've put water onto the Fineliners, and that's bled through. And surprisingly, up here where I had all that water with the watercolour brush pen, I've only got a little bit of bleed through. It has changed the structure of the paper though. Now after you've done that and you decide that it's not the effect that you were quite hoping for, you can of course always come back over those dry sections and then still do dots or cross hatching or any kind of textural look that you want to achieve. You can do that over the top of it, but just wait until the first lot is dry and then come back and try it. Alternatively, you can just lightly wet the area, and that's only damp, it's not sopping wet, and if I dot into that, it's bleeding immediately, and that's going to have a totally different look again. So all I can suggest is that this is just a starting point, and that the longer that you play with these sorts of pens, you'll think to yourself, oh, I wonder if that will work, and you can give it a go. And it may or may not work, and it may not work on every type of paper, and you're just going to have to experiment and accept that sometimes you will get pages where you might muck up a little bit and it doesn't work out how you had planned it to work out. And that's why it's always best to test these ideas out on a page like the wallpaper page or the page that you really don't like. And just, try your hardest to come up with all these different ideas on those pages so you don't ruin a good one. And I certainly wouldn't try this if you've got part way through and a picture that's pretty well resolved and you're happy with, and then suddenly you bring in a technique like this and decide that you don't like it. That would be really heartbreaking to sort of do that to yourself. And if you decide any of those areas are too dark, of course you can always come back with your gel pen or your paint pen, and you can put some, let me just get this started on a scratch piece before I do a big blob everywhere. And do your dots. And then when that is dry, come back over it again and knock it back with a pen to take the whiteness off, but it will still be lighter than the surrounding area. Or you could do that sort of thing and then gently pat it. And so you're going to get that very slight highlight there, but it's not going to be really obvious. And you can do that on any of your pens. It doesn't matter whether it's permanent, water-based, you know, or alcohol marker. Although on these water-based ones, what I do find is sometimes the colour comes through the acrylic paint pen. And it's all because it's got that water-based element. It won't do it on the permanent or the alcohol markers. Okay, so I hope that it gives you some different ideas again, and you can also see the types of materials that I'm working with. So don't forget that I did mention that I call all of these things water-based. So let's just get them all on here so you can see them all. So all of these various types of pens are all water-based markers. And I could be using one type of those, and if that's the case on Instagram, I'll just say it's Faber-Castell connector pens, or it's, you know, whatever. If I just put broadly water-based marker, then I mean that it could be any one or all of these types of things. I could be using all of them, and that could include those as well. So I do that because they are essentially all the same sort of thing. And you could ask, well, why do I have so many different ones? It's because each set does have a slightly different colour range, and when it comes to the markers, you know, the greater range of colours, the better it is for blending and getting different blended results. So that is why I do that. Plus I pick up the you know, the bargain things and the no-name things in discount stores whenever I can, just out of curiosity's sake, you know, trying to get that different colour or that, you know, slightly different result out of them, but essentially they are all the same. And before I close off, I'm just going to pick that back up one final time and show you that that's how the dots look over the top of the watercolour brush pen once it's been diluted. And you can see here where I did it on that slightly damp paper. Look at the difference between it. Hopefully that's in focus. And you can see what the bright white dots look like on the peacock's head. If I put a little bit of light blue over that, it's just going to look like a highlight without being that bright white. And then down there you can see those bits that I was patting with my finger. It's just blended it in, so it's not a really sharp, bright white highlight anymore. Okay, so if you're interested, I probably will continue to finish this page like I did with the other one, and I will probably show that in my completed pages video for April, or if you're on Instagram, it will show up on Instagram at some stage as well when I've completed it. So I hope that has been really helpful and interesting for you, and if you would like to ask any questions, pop them in the comments box. And I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.